All right, let's talk about the food options. Let's get this scroll back up. All right, let's start off with the carbohydrate sources. So carbohydrates, as we've seen, are going to be probably like the number one influencer of the development of DMT2. Here we have a list of the best, what I believe would be like the best carb sources to include in your meals, mostly because they're going to be a more complex carbohydrate structure, meaning it's going to be more difficult and take longer for the body to break down, which is a good thing because what that does is it slows the absorption of that nutrient into the body. And so you're not overwhelming the system again, you're not having too much blood sugar go into your blood at one time. And here I'm listing the amount of carbohydrates that are going to be in these foods and the serving size relative with the amount of fiber that makes up that carbohydrate. So when we think of carbohydrates, when you're looking at a nutrition facts label, it'll say like total carbohydrates, and then it'll tell you how much is in a serving. And then underneath that, it's going to tell its composition. So what type of carbohydrates are actually in that food. And what we want to look for is the fiber. So what we do is we look at that total number of carbohydrates, and we know that in a sweet potato there are 40 grams of carbohydrates, and 7 of those grams are from fiber. And that's, as you get used to looking at these nutrition facts labels, kind of looking over the comparison of how much fiber is in a serving compared to its total carbs, you'll get a better idea of what kind of foods to focus on. So here I've listed the foods that are going to have higher fiber to total carbohydrate ratios. Let's see. So we have zucchini and squashes. I included these in here because they have a large volume, and that volume is going to play a role in your satiety, so helping you feel a little bit fuller faster. It's relatively, you can eat a lot of this and like build up your carbohydrates compared to most other green vegetables such as broccoli, because while you can probably eat and make spaghetti squash, a zucchini salad, you could probably eat 1 to 2 cups, depending on how hungry you are, of zucchini in itself with other food items on your plate. But when we think of the other vegetables like broccoli, you're not going to want to eat 2 cups of broccoli. I mean, no one consistently wants to eat that much broccoli, typically. And so I'm including it under this best carbohydrate source because you're going to have zucchinis, you're going to have squash, other squashes like spaghetti squashes, and the ratio is that 3-to-1. So that's a pretty good carbohydrate source. And then we move down to our beans. Our beans are pretty good. It's a good ratio. Moving down, we have these fruits, right? The fruits are a mixed bag because you hear people talk about like, oh, fruits are healthy. And it's like, I mean, I should have prefaced with the fact that, you know, there are no good or bad foods, with the exception of trans fats. I mean, it's well known that trans fats are horrible for you, which is why they were outlawed. They're no longer allowed to be put into foods, but they can still be processed and developed into trans fats. But that's a different story. We won't go into that. But fruits have a lot of sugar. And when we're talking about the best carbohydrate sources, we want to think about the complexity of them. So when you consume these carbohydrates, they go into your stomach, and that's where they need to be broken down. And that's why I'm talking about, like, you want a more complex sugar because it's going to take longer to break down. When we think of, complex carbohydrates, but when we think of sugars, they're already in their simplest form. They're already pre-digested for us. It's like, here you go. Here's the sugar. Soak it up. Go into the veins super fast. It just gets in your stomach, it's shuttled in there, and it's great as a source of energy because it's providing energy very quickly. That's why, you know, there's the development of Gatorade for athletes. When you're training or you're performing in a sport, it's like you use up those carbohydrates for energy very fast, so you need a fast source. So you just drink sugar and it goes right into your bloodstream, which provides more energy. But imagine if you were in that same situation and then you ate a bunch of broccoli and tried to fill yourself with broccoli from the carbs. Like it's going to be overwhelming. Your stomach's going to be full. It's going to pull all the blood there. You're not going to be able to break down all of that complex carbohydrate quick enough to provide energy for the body. But two of my favorite fruits to consume for carbohydrates would be raspberries and strawberries. These have a pretty good ratio, raspberries being the best. There's a lot of fiber in raspberries. They taste fantastic, and the carbohydrates that are in 1 cup is pretty low. As you can see, 15 grams of carbs, and 8 of that is fiber, compared to strawberries where you have 12 grams of carbs and 3 of that's fiber. Now, when we look at other fruits that are going to be like packed with sugar, we can see like bananas and mangoes are way up there. In just a cup of sliced bananas, you have 34 grams of carbs, and 18 of that is sugar. When we look at, if we comparatively, so let me write this down. You have total carbs, right? 34 grams in that serving, that 1 cup of bananas. And then 4 of that is from fiber, so that leaves us with 30. And then minus the 18 from sugar, it leaves us with 12 grams of carbohydrates left. And that's going to be other structures of carbohydrates, whether it's, there are so many different forms of sugar and carbohydrates, but it's going to be a mix, and that's what we want to look at. If it's coming from, I guess the main focus is we want to ID this fiber and this sugar ratio. We want to make sure that it's low in sugar, high in fiber. All right, so again, like I said, what I wanted to preface with was, there aren't any bad foods. Like, they provide nutrients, and depending on your status, your health kind of dictates whether or not you should have that food and how much of that food you should have. So it's like, I don't want to call this like, oh, here are your healthy carbohydrates. Because it's like, yeah, bananas provide nutrients. Like, it's full of nutrients, and it could be beneficial for some people. But if you're trying to control your insulin sensitivity, it's like maybe bananas isn't the best choice of fruit for you at that time. All right, let's move on to fiber sources. So here, when we think of fiber, you're going to find it in basically all fruits, vegetables, some starches, and like grains, like your rice, your breads. But then you have a lot of processed carbohydrates like, our white bread, the white rice, because it's removed its outer shell, which loses its fiber. So when you eat a cup of white rice, you're eating virtually no fiber. But you can find it on, like I said, nuts and seeds, which wouldn't really fall too heavily in the carbohydrate source because they're typically lower in that area. But then you have your vegetables. So pretty much virtually all green leafy vegetables are going to be higher in carbohydrates. But when we look at vegetables like carrots, those are going to be a little bit higher in sugar. Not as much as you would find in fruit, but again, it's like maybe it's not a good idea to snack on baby carrots all day for some people. I love flaxseed meal or ground flaxseed because it is so high in fiber. As you can see, it's about 90% fiber. But flaxseed not only is great in fiber, it's good in healthy fats. Again, like I said, I don't want to use like the healthy versus non-healthy, but man, flaxseed is healthy fats. It's going to be your ALA, alpha linoleic acid, and it's going to improve your cardiovascular health. And so I guess I can't get ahead of myself. We'll get to that when we get into the fats. But avocado. So avocado is another one of those vegetables that have a higher carb count, But you can see that 16 grams out of the 20 it comes from fiber. Avocado is fantastic. So why would we want to include avocado? It has that fiber, and the purpose of fiber is it's going to slow down the digestion of carbohydrates. Like I said, it's that complexity. But fiber has this inability or next to no digestion, or shall I say, yeah, digestion and absorption in the body. So it's not going to be used for energy. Not like completely. There might be some that gets through, some that's absorbed, but only a little bit. So that's why we like to think, like, count those carbs as, or that fiber as part of our carbs. Where was I? Well, avocados, no, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. That's in the fats. All right, so high fiber foods, or processed foods. So there are a lot of companies out there taking advantage of the market of people who are looking for, they're on a ketogenic diet, so where you can still get your typical carb sources, but in a lower carb option. Quest Protein makes a protein bar that's like a very low net carbohydrate count, so most of it's going to be fiber. And then Mission makes a carb balanced tortilla that's low in carbs, higher in fiber. But it's questionable. I mean, quality control, right? We don't know if they're being consistent with the consistency of fiber that they're putting in their tortillas. It's not something that's like super tightly controlled, so it's a good idea to eat these sparingly, or maybe just one tortilla a day, one Quest bar a day. A good way to measure its effect on your body is just monitoring that blood sugar after eating one of these items. If you see it spike, then you know that you kind of got a food product that's not conducive to eating less carbohydrates, or just controlling the blood sugar response, because maybe there wasn't as much fiber in it as you were led to believe. All right, so one more thing I wanted to cover about fiber. Fiber also has a mechanism where in your gut, and it's moving through your digestive tract, so like in your intestines, that some of that fiber, what it will do is entrap and encase some of the fatty acids that you consume. And what that can do is it can have a positive effect on your lipids. So lipids, when I say lipids, I'm talking about the fat that's absorbed and kind of goes into your bloodstream. And what that does is it can help lower that LDL or increase that HDL. So the LDL is our bad cholesterol, and the HDL is our good cholesterol. Not only that, there are other digestive benefits to fiber, as well as making you feel more full, and helping with your bowel movements, cleaning out your intestines. So fiber is good overall. Now, these fats, I like to say these are the best fats because these are shown to improve your cardiovascular health, your heart health, what's being affected by that dyslipidemia, and it's going to correct that bad cholesterol, or at least contribute to it. So avocados are using avocado oil, and the same thing with olives. Olive oil has been shown to maintain its integrity at a lot higher heats than most oils. So when you're cooking, it's a good idea to cook with olive oil. But again, I still don't think you should use high heats when cooking with these oils, especially avocado oil, because it changes the function of that fat, and you kind of lose the benefits of it, which are, let's write this down. We have anti-inflammatory. Great, messed that up. Oh boy. And now it's moving everything. And it's going to improve your heart health. So it has cardiovascular benefits. What? So it's good to use these oils, but then you have to remember that fats have a lot of calories per gram. So let's write this down here as well. For carbohydrates, we have 4 calories per gram. Fats are 9. So as you can imagine, if you're having 100 grams of carbohydrates, you know that that's 400 calories. But then if you have 100 grams of fat, that's 900 calories. So that's why we want to kind of eat fats sparingly. And when we move on to, well, let me cover fatty fish real quick. This is where you're going to get the best fat. So like I said, avocado, olive oils, flaxseed, almonds, these come with what's called ALA, which is a type of omega-3 fatty acid. And this is good because it's going to reduce that inflammation in the body, improve that cardiovascular health. But what our bodies do is we synthesize a couple other omega-3 fats called EPA and DHA. EPA, this is the one that we want to focus on for heart health. Now, you can go after a fish oil supplement or an omega-3 supplement, but a lot of them are trash. A lot of them, like, people will know superficially that fish oil and omega-3s are good for us. They're healthy. But it's what we're seeing is that EPA is directly associated with heart health. And so when you're examining the composition on those fish oil supplements, you want to make sure that it's really high in EPA. DHA, however, is also good, but that's going to be more involved with your neural development, so your brain health. DHA is really good for improving cognitive function, and it's believed to be really good at improving symptoms of depression and potentially anxiety. So that's why I think fish oils supplements are a great addition or supplement for your diet. I think pretty much everyone's going to benefit from consuming a fish oil supplement. Fats to limit. So again, I don't want to say these are bad fats. When we look at the fatty meats, the milk fats, whole eggs, we're looking at saturated fats. We're looking at a higher composition of that saturated fat. And it's been believed for a long time that saturated fats are bad for you. Now, this is being, disproven. We know that saturated fats are, we need them to maintain our health, but it's easy to overdo it. We're way more likely to consume a lot of saturated fats compared to the better fats that we're going to get from those olive oil and nuts and seeds and fish. Over consuming it definitely can lead to a higher risk of inflammation, as well as, causing that dyslipidemia again. So it is better to limit that. So when consuming meat, it's a good idea to go for leaner cuts. So when you're eating chicken, go for the chicken breast rather than the organs or thighs. And then milk, it's like get the low-fat milks or cheese. I know that Kraft makes some types of cheese where it's like low fat or no fat, and so it's just going to be higher in protein. But that's just an option. I'm not saying that it's necessary to cut out saturated fats. It's just a good idea to, opt for the polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats that you're going to find. So polyunsaturated fats, monounsaturated fatty acids that we get up here, right? So that's right here, saturated fat. Again, also because those fats add up fast. Like if you're eating a lot of meat, which I definitely think is a good idea, or let me rephrase that. It's about preference, but what I meant is protein. So protein is beneficial, but if you're eating fatty protein meats, then your calories are going to run out really fast, and then you're more likely going to gain weight because you're eating in excess of calories. So you're getting more calories than your body's burning, which is going to contribute to the direction that you don't want to go, unless, of course, you're trying to gain weight. Now, moving on to protein. Protein is fantastic for multiple reasons. It's basically it's hard to go wrong with protein unless you have, some issues such as, kidney problems, because the kidneys are what's going to help filter that protein, and if you consume it, you can stress it out. So if you don't have kidney problems, you're basically going to be good. What it does is it increases the thermic effect in the body, which is going to increase the caloric expenditure. So you're going to burn more calories just by metabolizing protein. And then you're going to experience increased satiety. So when you eat, if you imagine eating that steak, it kind of fills up your stomach pretty fast. It's so dense. But then you have your bone and your muscle density, and especially as we age. Once we hit that, 40 years old and on, it's really important to make sure that we're taking care of our body, preventing injury. And how do we do that? We want to strengthen our bones. We want to maintain that bone density, that muscle density, and protein's how you do that. That's pretty much what it's made up of. That's what our bones and muscle are made up of. Let me rephrase that. Bones are not made up of a ton of protein. Those are going to be your minerals. But that muscle is going to contribute to that bone density and vice versa. So protein is going to help maintain both of those. Protein is also, they're the building blocks. So proteins are made up of amino acids, and those amino acids contribute to every metabolic process in the body. Our body, from our eyes, our vision, our hair, our nails, skin, the functioning of cells in our organs, it's all protein. So if you're providing the essential building blocks, which are those amino acids that make up that protein, you're kind of set with maintaining the health on your body. The protein supplements are also awesome because they're convenient. Not everyone wants to eat a bunch of meat. Meat's expensive. You can get several different kinds of protein supplements, whether they come from plant-based proteins, milk proteins, egg protein. You can even get it in beef protein. There are plenty of options for whoever you are, whatever your preference is. And so it's good to search those out, find which work for you. And that's a good way to supplement to make sure that there's a lot of protein that's making up your total caloric intake in a day. All right, so I guess that pretty much covers the best way to approach the diet. It's best when we think of treating DMT2, it's a good idea to kind of keep the carbohydrates lower. I recommend 30% or less of your total caloric intake. I don't want to go through math because I don't want to embarrass myself on here because I'm not good at math on the fly. But let me just write down here what I think a good place to start. So I think 40, 30, 30. This is 40% protein, 30% fats, 30% carbs. Oh, forgot to turn off Do Not Disturb. Okay. Oops. So imagine, I could do this. All right, your total recommended amount of calories in a day is going to be that 2,000 mark. So if you take 2,000 and you do 40%, that's 800 kcal from your protein. I should know this. 600 kcal fat, 600 from carbs. And then as you can see, I wrote the grams up there. So it's 200 grams of protein. $222 grams of fat. Wait, no, that was bad. $67 grams of fat. And 150 grams of carbs. And as you go throughout your day, there are plenty of different apps available that can kind of help you count calories, help you understand how much you're eating throughout the day. Let me move that down. And I think that's the best way to approach, battling DMT2. When you're able to make these diet changes and make them work for you, there are a lot of options to choose from. It's just there's some like general carbohydrates you want to avoid, which are going to be the processed carbohydrates. So like your white bread, pasta, and white rice, even brown rice. Like, I know people are all about like, oh, brown rice is going to be way better. It's not that much better than white rice. It's not that much of a benefit when you keep the bran on there or the outer shell. But in a way, it's going to be a little bit better. So again, the best ways to approach your carbohydrate intake is spread it throughout the day, have smaller amounts, so that way you're not overwhelming your body with too much at one time. So what's going to overwhelm the body the fastest? Sugar. And that's going to be foods. Let me just write some of those down because they're not on here clearly. Sugars, which you're going to find in juice, fruit juices. You're going to find it in soda. These are just straight injection of sugars, which they have their place. But if you want to avoid that insulin response, that overwhelming carbohydrate like absorption, it's best to absorb these. It's best to avoid these sugars. Let's see. And then, candy. Most white grains, so like white bread, rice, pasta. And if you're craving these items, it's like you can go online, you can look up different options that people have come out with that are going to be lower in carbohydrates, so they're good substitutes. I mean, I think they're called shirataki noodles. But they're noodles, and they have virtually no carbohydrates, just fiber. It's a good alternative, but it's not going to be the exact same, like a spaghetti. But you can still like make your tomato paste or the marinara sauce, whatever goes on spaghetti, and you can mix it in. So that gives a good overview of like, general nutrition that's going to help improve your DMT2, your lipid panel. But then I guess I forgot blood pressure. We want to focus on blood pressure, and while it's good to limit the salt, I don't think it's a good idea to completely cut out salt because there are going to be other side effects that come from that. You could lose, your energy, you can cramp up. If you were to have low sodium or salt consistently, but then have a bunch one day, then you might have an influx of water retention and increase in blood pressure. I think it's good to stay with a consistent amount. If your body's consistently consuming a certain amount, your body gets used to that. So if the recommended amount is 1,500 milligrams a day, but you're consuming 3,000 per day, your body's going to get used to that. And what your body does is it gets used to that by excreting it more. But that's why it's good to have an increased amount of water to help flush it out. Also to reduce the stress on the kidneys, because again, when we look at DMT2, we know that protecting the kidneys is important so we don't develop that diabetic nephropathy. Now, what we know is that we want to increase potassium intake to control that blood pressure. Potassium is pretty hard to get in. You have to eat a lot of fruits, vegetables, and grains that have higher amounts of potassium, such as like potatoes, sweet potatoes. But again, when you're doing that, you're likely to overdo your carbohydrate consumption. A lot of people say bananas are good for potassium, and it's like, yeah, it's true. It has a good amount, but I think the best source of potassium is right here, avocado. Great for potassium. You're going to get a lot, but not everyone wants to pay for avocados because they're expensive. So the next best thing is to supplement potassium. And that's something you can find at, on Amazon or your local supplement store. But potassium is good. You're typically not going to overdo it because you require so much in a day. This is how much is recommended in a day. But that pretty much covers it. So that's that overview of that nutrition approach to DMT2. If you have any questions, send them my way. All right, thanks.